Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun.
Vancha Kapa Truvya Kripasan Beva Cha Paditanam Pavanebo Vaishnavebo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, welcome to our ongoing online study of the Sri Upadesamrta. In our previous lesson, lesson 3, we were looking at text 4 of the Upadesamrita. We were looking at our experience of Sadvidha Priti Lakshana, the 6 loving symptoms as demonstrated amongst and performed amongst devotees in ISKCON. And we were also discussing some of the challenges that we experience in maintaining the 6 loving exchanges. We were discussing the relevance of the verse Nectar Siddha Krishna Prem in terms of applying these 6 loving exchanges in preaching and spreading Krishna consciousness and providing association to people in general in this way. Qualifications required to utilize contributions and spending at least 50% of one's incomes in the service of the Lord. Let's take a look at lesson 4, texts 5 to 6 of Sri Upadesamrita, translation and commentary by ISKCON founder Acharya, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshush Unmilatang Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimade Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauruvani Pracharne Nivishesha Shunnavadi Prashtatadeshtane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Mukham Kaditi Bachalam Bhangam Langayate Girim Jat Kripatavaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinatarinam. Let's chant the Sanskrit of text 5, Sri Upadesamrita. Krishnati Yasha Giritam Manasadriyeta Tikshashti Chit Pranati Bishta Bhajantam Isham Susrushaya Bhajana Vigyam Anannamanya Nindadi Shunyaridam Ipshita Shangalabdha. Rupa Goswami is explaining that one should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, diksha, and engaged in worshipping the deity. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Prabhupada in his purport explains, in order to intelligently apply the 6-fold loving reciprocations mentioned in the previous verse, one must select proper persons with careful discrimination. Srila Rupa Goswami therefore advises that we should meet with the Vaishnavas in an appropriate way according to their particular status. In this verse, he tells us how to deal with the 3 types of devotees, the Kanishta Adhikari, the Madhyam Adhikari, and the Uttam Adhikari. So let's take a look at Srila Rupa Goswami's description of the Kanishta Adhikari, the beginning stage of devotional life. Krishnati Yasha Giritam Manasadriyeta. In the words or the speech, Giri, Manasa Adriyeta, one should mentally honor. One should mentally honor any person who in any way is chanting the names of Krishna. In this connection, Prabhupada gives the example of George Harrison, the famous musician from the Beatles. One of our friends, a famous English musician, has become attracted to chanting the holy names of Krishna. We offer our respects to him without reservations. Now, not necessarily that George Harrison was at the standard of the Madhyam Bhakti and following all of the required principles, but Prabhupada is explaining here that Krishnati Yashagiri Manasadriyeta, such a devotee who's chanting Hare Krishna, from whose lips the holy name can be heard. Manas Adriyeta, in the mind we show respect to such a person. Prabhupada's explaining, we offer him respect without reservation, for we are actually seeing that this gentleman is advancing gradually in Krishna consciousness. Such a person should always be shown respect. Even in his records, he has several times mentioned the holy name of Krishna. Of course, those of you who are familiar with the huge contribution that George Harrison made to spreading Krishna consciousness. In fact, I heard once that devotees were asking about George Harrison's initiation, and Prabhupada said he already has the name of the Lord, Hari-son. Hari-son. The tremendous impact he had on spreading Krishna consciousness with his hit record, My Sweet Lord, in which the Hare Krishna mantra was sung. And it became a famous hit all over the world, and in this way he contributed in such a major way for spreading Krishna consciousness in every home in the Western world. Also, George Harrison contributed the cost of publishing the Krishna book, and he's written the introduction to the Krishna book. At his home, he offers respect to pictures of Krishna and also to the preachers of Krishna consciousness. In all regards, he has a very high estimation of Krishna's name and Krishna's activities. The conclusion is that anyone who is trying to advance in Krishna consciousness by regularly chanting the holy name should always be respected by the Vaishnava. George Harrison, the key. Prabhupada's quoting several verses from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila. Prabhu kahe, Mahaprabhu said, Jar mukhe shune ekbar Krishna naam, she puja shreshta shabakam. If one hears a person say even once the word Krishna, that person should be accepted as the best man out of the common group. Ataeb jar mukhe ek Krishna naam, she to Vaishnava koriha taha shaman. One who is interested in chanting the holy name of Krishna, or who by practice likes to chant Krishna's names, should be accepted as a Vaishnava and offered respects as such, at least within one's mind. So many devotees that chant the name of Krishna, that come to the temple, Jai Gopal, Jai Sri Radhe, these persons are all considered a preliminary level of Vaishnava, and we should respect and have relationships with such Kanishta Vaishnavas. Now Rupa Goswami explains the symptoms of the Madhyam, the medium-situated devotee. Dikshati chet pranati bishta bhajantam isham. He has taken initiation and is bhajantam isham. He's seriously engaged in worshipping the Lord, a committed devotee. So such a devotee, pranati bi, we should offer our humble obeisances to. Not necessarily that we should be overly conscientious of whether or not the devotee has taken initiation in our line. The Madhyam Bhakta may also be considered committed devotee. He may not have taken initiation as such, but if he's on the level of an initiated devotee and that he's following the principles and chanting 16 rounds of Mahamantra each day, then he should be shown respect, and we can pay our obeisances to such a committed devotee, even though he may not have actually taken initiation, but he may be preparing to take initiation or desiring to take initiation, and is similarly situated in a very substantial, regulated practice of Krishna consciousness, a committed practitioner. To such a devotee, we can offer our humble obeisances and place our head on the ground at their feet. Ishware, now, Prabhupada in his purport, he goes on to explore in more detail the specific distinction between the Kanishta Bhakta and the Madhyam Bhakta. Let us examine. Prabhupada's quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam, Ishware tara dineshu palesheshu dvishachacha premi maitri kripo pekshasha karoti samadhyama. The symptoms of the Madhyamadikari are that he is a worshipper of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the highest object of love. He makes friends with the devotees, he's merciful to the ignorant, and he avoids those who are envious. So these four different types of activities are described. For the Supreme Lord, it's prema. He premamaya bhakti jog. With love and devotion, he worships and serves the Lord. Maitri. For the Vaishnavas, he has friendly relationships. For those who are innocent and as yet not realize their eternal relationship with Krishna, but have the potential of beginning devotional service, the Madhyam Bhakta, he is merciful to them, kripa, and he tries to bring them to Krishna consciousness. He tries to educate them in Krishna consciousness through preaching. And the envious person who's not inclined, or has no interest in approaching Krishna and beginning Krishna consciousness, or may even be antagonistic towards or aggressive towards or in opposition to the devotees, and he's avoiding or neutral, opekha. One does not associate with such people to further agitate them. In the case if we are disturbing such a person in our efforts to preach, then actually that may make them more aggressive, and in that way their propensity to progress in spiritual life can actually be damaged. So in that way it's better that we just ignore such a person and rather direct our energy of preaching towards those who are somewhat inclined recipients. Prabhupada goes on to quote from Srimad Bhagavatam 11th Canto, chapter 2, text 47, describing the distinction between the Madhyam and Kanishta level, that Acharyam eva haraye pujam ja shradayiyate na cha bhakteshu chanyeshu sha bhakta prakrita smrita. The prakrita bhakta, the Kanishta devotee, the Kanishta Vaishnav, that is here described as the bhakta prakrita, the materialistic devotee. He may be Acharyam eva haraye pujam ja shradayiyate, very devotionally, very faithfully worshipping the Lord, or have faith in the deity. Perhaps the type of devotee who regularly visits the temple and takes darshan of the Lord and brings gifts for the Lord and worships the Lord in the temple. However, the distinction can be seen in the third line, that na tad bhakteshu chanyeshu. This devotee, he does not know how to behave toward devotees. Na tad bhakteshu. He doesn't understand the importance of associating with devotees and hearing from devotees and taking shelter of the Vaishnavas in order to progress in Krishna consciousness. He doesn't understand the importance of that, and he's not following that. He's not taking shelter of Vaishnavas, and he's not cultivating appropriate relationships as previously described in the Upadesamrta with the Vaishnavas, the 6 loving symptoms, etc. And Chanyeshu, other people, not only is he not cultivating appropriate relationship with the devotees, but he's also not caring about people in general. Anyeshu means people in general. This Vaishnava, although he has great faith in the deity and loves the deity, he is not preaching Krishna consciousness. He's not spreading Krishna consciousness. So this is the distinction between the Madhyam and the Kanishta Adhikari. The Madhyam Bhakta will maintain the appropriate relationships with the Vaishnavas, as the previous verse, text 4, described, and he will also be inclined to spread Krishna consciousness and show mercy to the innocent. These are the qualifications which make one eligible to be considered on the Madhyam platform. The Madhyam Adhikari is both maintaining good relationships with Vaishnavas, accepting the shelter of the spiritual master, and he's also committed to spreading Krishna consciousness and sharing mercy to people in general. Rupa Goswami then goes on to describe the symptoms of the Uttam Adhikari, the topmost classification of Vaishnav. Sustrusha bhajana bhigyam anannamanna nindari shunya ridam ipshita shanga labdha. He is anya nindari shunya ridam. He's not inclined towards criticism of others, and he is bhajana bhigyan anannam. He's Bigyan, he's realized, he's advanced in his bhajan, in his ananna bhakti, in his unmixed, in his unalloyed service to Lord Hari. He has purity in his Krishna consciousness. He is a completely purified soul, focused exclusively on the interest of the Lord and the service of the Lord. This is called Ananya Bhakti. And he is advanced in the performance of Ananya Bhakti and worship of the Lord in purity. So such a devotee, Rupa Goswami is explaining, Ipshita Sangha Labdha. Association with such a devotee, we should desire, we should seek out. Prabhupada further elaborates on the symptoms of the Uttam Adhikari in his purport. When a person realizes himself to be an eternal servitor of Krishna, he loses interest in everything but Krishna's service, always thinking of Krishna, devising means by which to spread the holy name of Krishna. He understands that his only business is in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Such a person is to be recognized as an Uttam Adhikari, and his association should be immediately accepted. Indeed, the advanced Uttam Adhikari Vaishnav devotee should be accepted as a spiritual master. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given some practical hints, some very observable symptoms of the Upadesamrta. Prabhupada's explaining to the effect that an Upadesamrta Vaishnava can be recognized by his ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. So we can determine the spiritual level of the Vaishnava in regard to what extent he's able to spread the holy name, to what effect he's able to have an impact on others and bring them to the path of Krishna consciousness. This indicates great spiritual potency. If we analyze Prabhupada's comment in this regard, the specific symptoms that he mentions, we can see that many members of our Krishna conscious society are on the level of Uttam Adhikari, as herein described by Srila Prabhupada. He's realized he's an eternal servant of Krishna. Many of our preachers have been completely committed to preaching Krishna consciousness for close to 50 years of their life. So this cannot be done unless a person has actually realized who they are. They've realized that they are Krishna's servant, and evidence of that realization is that they've given their life for the service of Krishna. This is a symptom of a realized devotee. Only interest is in Krishna's service. He's always thinking of means, always thinking of Krishna, and always thinking of devising means to spread the holy name. We see this symptom in many of our senior preachers in Krishna consciousness. They're completely absorbed in spreading Krishna consciousness and always thinking about, always meditating on how different ways, new ways that we can introduce Krishna consciousness, ways that we can expand the Krishna consciousness movement. In fact, they're completely absorbed in this endeavor, and they're dedicated their lives completely for this mission. This is symptoms of Uttam Adhikari, a very advanced devotee, a first-class devotee. The only business is spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world, and they have the ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. Yes, certainly the position of Srila Prabhupada is, of course, incomparable and extremely exalted. And we can also see, after Prabhupada's manifest pastimes on this planet were completed and Prabhupada entered the Aprakat Lila, then we see the preaching of Krishna consciousness, particularly in India, and spread in a tremendous way. And tens of thousands of followers, tens of thousands of devotees have been inspired in Krishna consciousness by Prabhupada's followers. And this is indicative of the fact that they are on the Uttam platform. Such exalted souls we can accept as spiritual master. And this is completely in line with the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami. Translation to text 6 of the Upadesamrta. Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee's having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee, but despite such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. It is exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam and mud. The Ganges waters do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without consideration of the condition of the water. In his purport to text 6, Srila Prabhupada is explaining Krishna's devotee is not subjected to material condition, even though his bodily features may appear materially conditioned. One should therefore not see a pure devotee from a materialistic point of view. We may have a tendency to view devotees in our movement from a materialistic point of view. For example, we may consider devotees in terms of their ethnic background or race and use terminology like a foreign devotee or Indian devotee, Russian devotee. Even within India, different ethnic backgrounds, we may use terminology like Bengali devotee or North Indian or a South Indian devotee, or even within South India, we may have our Tamil devotees, Malayalam devotees, Telenga, Andhra, etc. This is a tendency resulting from our previous materialistic conditioning. Aham mameti, I am this body, and everything related to this body is related to me. This is bodily consciousness of life. This tendency may be there, and sometimes we see in our activities in the Krishna consciousness movement. I'm residing in a large community in Sridham Mayapur, and we have devotees from different ethnic backgrounds, and still we see that the tendency amongst devotees is that they tend to develop friendship and interact generally with devotees from similar ethnic backgrounds, a South Indian group, a Chinese group, Russian group, a Bengali group, Oriental group, etc. As a movement, and particularly from the point of view of administration and education, we should function in such a way as to try to minimize this type of tendency, and as much as possible we should work toward integration amongst devotees regardless of ethnic backgrounds, based upon our equality all as being servants of Krishna, and particularly members of Prabhupada's movement and followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and predominantly focus on that identification. Prabhupada's continuing in his comments that actually observing a devotee from a materialistic point of view in this way is detrimental for one's advancement in Krishna consciousness. One is forbidden to observe, Prabhupada writes, the activities of a pure Vaishnava from a material point of view. For the neophyte, especially, considering a pure devotee from a material point of view is very injurious. One should therefore avoid observing a pure devotee externally, but should try to see the internal features and understand how he is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In this way, one can avoid seeing the pure devotee from a material point of view, and thus one can be gradually purified, become a purified devotee himself. So we need to be cautious, and we need to be attentive to this propensity and avoid the propensity to view devotees from a materialistic point of view by appreciating, by observing, and by recognizing and by appreciating their spiritual life, their commitment to Krishna consciousness, their seriousness in practicing sadhana, their efforts in preaching Krishna consciousness, and in general their devotional qualities. We should view the devotees in this way. We should look for these qualities. We should recognize these features of the devotee, and in this way train ourselves to view the devotees from the spiritual point of view. In this way we can protect ourselves from the materialistic approach, which can be very injurious for our development in Krishna consciousness. This is a very important point, and particularly relevant in Rupa Goswami's instructions from Upadesamrta centuries ago, but actually especially relevant for us in the circumstances that we find ourselves in the multi-ethnic environment of the ISKCON society. Prabhupada similarly goes on to describe the importance of viewing the pure devotee, the Uttam Bhakta, in the appropriate manner, and specifically being careful to avoid a critical mentality toward an advanced Uttam Bhakta, and the tendency to advise or to instruct an Uttam Bhakta is also something that we have to be very careful to avoid. Prabhupada explains. An empowered person who is actually engaged in the confidential service of the Lord should not be treated as an ordinary human being, for it is stated that unless one is empowered by Krishna, one cannot spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. In this case, we can see that Prabhupada is also reflecting in these comments in relation to the circumstances that he personally was facing when he was with us on the planet in his Prakat Lila spreading Krishna consciousness. Actually, Prabhupada was criticized by his peers, by his god brothers, and sometimes criticized for things that were not at all appropriate. And in fact, considering, as Prabhupada's mentioning here, the evidence of his empowerment, being uniquely empowered to single-handedly spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world, take the Srimad Bhagavatam out of India, take the holy name and travel on the Jaladuta, and be the first great Vaishnava preacher to step onto the Western world. And Prabhupada so effectively implanted Krishna consciousness and built the institute and society which is effectively spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. The evidence is so overwhelming of his empowerment by the Lord. Prabhupada's explaining that such an empowered devotee cannot be considered an ordinary person, cannot even be considered an ordinary devotee, and therefore is not subject to criticism or instruction by ordinary devotees. Prabhupada's commenting. Prabhupada continues. It is also an offense to consider an empowered Vaishnava an object of disciplinary action. It is an offense to try to give him advice or to correct him. One can distinguish between a neophyte Vaishnava and an advanced Vaishnava by their activities. So it is offensive for a neophyte devotee to attempt to instruct or give an advice to a very advanced devotee, an empowered Vaishnava, the Uttam Adhikari. And the Uttam Adhikari also should not be considered to be subject of disciplinary action from junior devotees. This is very offensive and would be greatly detrimental in the spiritual life of the junior devotee. And Prabhupada is giving us some very important instructions here, which are also very relevant in our movement in ISKCON. Unfortunately, in the modern age of internet, we do find extensive criticism of senior devotees and very empowered devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement, published in internet. And of course, the people who criticize preachers in that way, acting in an offensive way, in a way which is very detrimental for their own spiritual advancement, and also simply hearing such criticism of ISKCON's preachers is also very detrimental to our spiritual advancement, and we should be very careful to avoid hearing and becoming polluted and contaminated by criticism of exalted preachers in Krishna consciousness movement. We should be very attentive to avoid hearing that criticism at all costs. So in conclusion, text 6, Prabhupada explains, in order to intelligently apply the sixfold loving reciprocations mentioned in the previous verse, one must select proper persons with careful discrimination. Srila Rupa Goswami therefore advises that we should meet with the Vaishnavas in an appropriate way according to their particular status. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.